and I'm happy to answer any questions about these particular objects. One of the things that I should point out is that when you think about a library, when you think about books, we always, I mean, before I encounter these, think about the books as always in a codex format. Even if they're manuscript, if they're written by hand, whether they're written in print, if they're actually printed on a printing press, it's something that we know, that we just turn pages. Whereas if we look at the way that we operate today in an online environment, we're sort of going back to a scroll. Literally, there's a scroll bar, and we go vertically through a page as we read and sort of ingest information. So somebody asked a question regarding the first scroll. Do you know, in addition to reading the scroll, was there also a local Perm being celebrated? And the answer is yes. They would celebrate their own Perm, the equivalent of a Perm on that day. And they would, upon which they would read from this scroll. So that was part of the service of their own Perm Saragossa, which ironically was not celebrated, as far as we can tell, in Saragossa or Syracuse itself, but rather among the emigres from these lands. And that's part of those who say that it was Saragossa in Spain, say that it was celebrated in these places, Tunisia, places in Turkey, in modern day Turkey, modern day Greece, because those were Spanish emigres. And so there were all people who had left Saragossa and then would continue to celebrate their local Purim on that day. And local Purims is a fairly well-known phenomenon. We have quite a number of local Purims documents about local Purims in our collection here. I wrote a blog post on them, really from all over Europe and parts of North Africa and the Islamic lands, where if there was a situation where the Jewish community was under distress and there was a great danger to the Jewish community that then they escaped from in whatever format, it always sort of harkened back to the Book of Esther and this great miracle, and then which was then celebrated locally by those Jews or Jews who had lived, who were descended of Jews who lived in a particular place on the day that this event occurred. Hi, Jocelyn. Does something written on a scroll have more value to the creator or recipients than if it were written in a book? So that's a great question, and this is really why I wanted to show the scrolls. The answer is yes. The answer is certainly when writing a Torah scroll, there's a whole books have been written on the laws of writing a Torah scroll. Has to be written in a certain way. The letters have to be formed a certain way. If the letter isn't perfect, if part of the ink has been removed, the scroll can't be used. And so there's certainly, if a Torah scroll falls on the floor, then the community has to fast for a certain number of days. There's certainly within Judaism a very strong reverence of the scroll as a material object. And so when a community or an individual chooses to write something in a scroll, that's saying something. It's two things. First, it's the sacredness of the event or what happened, and this is where they're talking, especially when they're talking about things like miracles. So this was something very special, but also in that scrolls are something old, and so this is an old important event that we want to remember for generations. So that's another sort of reason that they may have written these on scrolls. Are scrolls being written today in the type I have shown? So that's a good question. Torah scrolls are being written Megillot, so various books from not only the 5 books of Moses, but also from the prophets, from the writings from various parts of the corpus of the Hebrew Bible are written to be used in synagogue. I don't personally know of scrolls that are being written today, which doesn't mean, actually, I should say I do. There was actually very recently, last year, there was an auction at which there was a scroll of this is somewhat biblical because it's actually biblical text. There's a sort of a secret within Judaism that that according to the I think it's in the Talmud that Moses was taught by the angel of death that the way to cure sickness was to read the passage about the ketoret, so the spice offering in the temple. And so that has been a ritual done in order to, especially during times of plague, and this has been documented very well. Of course, over the last year, there's been a lot of research that has come out about the history of plague all over the place, but within Judaism as well. And so there was an auction last year at which somebody, there was one of the items for auction was a scroll of the Ketoret, so of this particular passage, so that somebody could have that scroll and again read it as a sacred act, reading it as part of prayer to save oneself or to cure or to pray for one's family members who were dealing with COVID. So that's a contemporary example. Thanks for that question. Oh wait, more. Are there containers to store and preserve the scrolls? There absolutely are. In fact, when I started this session talking about not wearing gloves, maybe I'll just bring my case over. The case that holds the Megillat Eva, the scroll from Rabbi Yom Tov Lippman Heller, has a scroll case, and there's a special notice on the box that our amazing conservation department created for this item. I'm going to try and put it under the camera, although I'm not sure if that's going to. It might be a little lopsided, so forgive me. And I'm not going to open it because it actually says that one must wear gloves to use it. So here is this case, and you see it says, metal containers delicate and flaking must be handled with gloves. And I'm not going to touch it because I abide by the rules of conservation, but there is that metal container. Now this container would have been, is much later than the actual scroll itself, and that's the top that would come off, and you can stick the scroll inside. But that object is something that's not in greatest condition, and so because it's not paper or parchment and it's flaking, it needs to be used with gloves. So that's why you do sometimes have gloves within the rear book room. Okay, let's get back. So Emily asks about other examples of vertical scrolls in the Hebrew manuscript tradition. I have not seen other examples of vertical scrolls. To me, this is very unusual. That being said, there's a lot that I don't know. And it's quite possible that there are other vertical scrolls within Judaism. When Dr. Hayes gave his talk, and I strongly recommend that you take a look. Unfortunately, I can't share it here. Well, you know what I might be able to do? I might be able to type an answer. I can. I'm not going to do it. It's too complicated. But if you go to the Jewish Studies page, if you even Google Jewish Studies, Norman E. Alexander Lectures, Columbia, it's the most recent lecture. We had a celebration of collections, so we had 3 speakers, and I encourage you to listen to all of them. They were all wonderful, including our own Alexis Hagedorn from our conservation department. And Yossi Chayes was the 3rd talk, and he spoke about this scroll in depth. He's also published multiple times about this scroll, which seems particularly unique.
Thank you so much for this, Michelle. I have a question from a real layman, which is the height of the scroll, or the part that's being unrolled. Is that based on fanciness, kind of like a folio, or based on use, or are there certain conventions with regard to certain texts that guides that, or how is that determined?
Great question. So it depends. Within again, the sacred scrolls have rules. Torah scrolls have to be a certain number of lines and a certain number of columns. It's very, very structured. Whereas Megillah, so the Book of Esther, as a scroll, which is used in the synagogue, read officially from this text, there are sort of general formats in which they're written, but there are variants. So it's different than the Torah scroll, which has very strict rules about it. And as you saw here, so the size of that Megillat Saragossa, which is relatively small, probably maybe 4 or 5 inches, was the manuscript itself. There are Megillot Esther, so the Esther scroll, also that small, written in that format, and then also very large. And the rollers, is just for ease of use. Sometimes you have a roller, sometimes you don't. As you saw, some of these had rollers, some of them didn't. So for non-sacred scrolls, it really varies. Someone asked about a recent article in the New York Times about the foldings of a letter. Are scrolls ever folded? I think I'm understanding this question. Or would a scroll have to be rolled to be called a scroll? I believe that a scroll would have to be rolled to be called a scroll, but I don't know.
I think that's a good existential question to end on. We'll tentatively say yes, but thank you so much, Michelle. We've had a lot of wonderful questions and engagement, and we will post this lecture to the library YouTube channel so we can revisit it. And in the meantime, thank you again, and I hope to see you all here in just over a month for our next curatorial short.
Thank you so much.
Be well, everyone.
Bye-bye all.